My garden. It's not your typical perfectly manicured suburban patch of green. It's me. A little bit chaotic, a little bit overgrown, but full of personality. And the heart and soul of my garden? My gnomes. Yeah, I know, gnomes. Some people think they're tacky, but I love them. They're not just decorations, they're practically family. Each one has its own story, its own quirks. There's Bartholomew, the fisherman, perpetually casting his line into the, admittedly rather small, koi pond. There's Gertrude, the gnome gardener, always tending to her tiny patch of slightly overgrown herbs. And there's Winston, the gnome philosopher, perpetually pondering the mysteries of the universe while sitting on a miniature mushroom. These guys are more than just lawn ornaments. They're like little reminders of good times. Bartholomew was a gift from my grandpa, who loved fishing more than anything. Gertrude was a present from my best friend, who has the greenest thumb I've ever seen. And Winston? Winston was a flea market find, a little bit chipped and faded, but full of gnome wisdom, I guess. My garden is their kingdom. They've got their little gnome village set up under the shade of the old apple tree. They've got their own miniature furniture, their own tiny tools, even their own little gnome-sized bird bath. It's whimsical, it's quirky, it's mine, and it's perfect. At least it was, until the HOA decided to stick their noses where they didn't belong. Again. These guys, I swear, they're like some kind of lawn Gestapo, obsessed with uniformity to the point of absurdity. Their ideal lawn? A perfectly manicured, sterile, decoration-free expanse of identical green. Think golf course, but boring. No flowers, no statues, definitely no gnomes, just grass. And not even interesting grass. Just plain, boring, regulation-approved grass. They're all about curb appeal and property values, which, in their minds, translates to everything must look exactly the same so that rich people will want to move here and make us all slightly less poor. It's a whole thing. They've got rules about everything, from the height of your hedges to the color of your mailbox. I wouldn't be surprised if they have a rule about the acceptable shade of green for your lawn, probably something like Pantone 342C only. They've been a pain in the butt for years, targeting anyone who dares to deviate from their vision of suburban perfection. Mrs. Higgins got a nasty letter about her excessively colorful petunias. Mr. Johnson was threatened with fines for unauthorized bird feeders. They even went after the poor kid who had a lemonade stand in his front yard because it detracted from the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. Seriously? A lemonade stand? Uptight, controlling, deeply, deeply humorless. They're the kind of people who would probably write you up for having a dandelion in your yard, or for smiling too much, or for breathing air that they deem too cheerful. They're the fun police, the beige brigade, the lawn Nazis, and they were coming for my gnomes. I just knew it. Yep, the inevitable happened. The HOA's reign of terror extended to my little gnome village. It arrived in the mail, of course. The dreaded letter. Crisp white envelope. Official-looking font. The kind of thing that makes your blood pressure spike just by looking at it. I knew what it was before I even opened it. The gnome eviction notice. I sighed, grabbed the letter, and went inside. I poured myself a stiff drink. It was only 10 a.m., but hey, dealing with the HOA is stressful, and braced myself. I opened the letter, and there it was, in all its bureaucratic glory. Dear Mr. Jackson, it began, it has come to the attention of the Willow Creek Estates Architectural Harmony Committee. Yes, they actually have a committee for that. That your garden decorations are in violation of Section 3, subsection C, Paragraph 7 of the Willow Creek Estates Covenants, Conditions and Restrictions, CC and Rs. I kept reading, and it got worse. Specifically, the letter continued, the presence of multiple garden gnomes is deemed to be unsightly. Unsightly? Seriously, that's their official reason. Unsightly. It's so vague, so subjective, so utterly ridiculous, it's like they just pulled a word out of a hat. We don't like them, therefore they are unsightly. That's basically what it boils down to. The letter went on to say that my gnomes, detract from the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood, and fail to conform to the established standards of lawn decorum. Lawn decorum? Is that even a thing? It sounds like something out of a Jane Austen novel. And then, the kicker. Failure to remove these unauthorized decorations within 7 days will result in a fine of $100 per gnome per day. $100 per gnome per day? These guys were serious. They weren't just content with making my life miserable, they wanted to make me bankrupt too. I crumpled up the letter, after taking a picture of it, of course, for posterity and for future Reddit rants, and took another swig of my drink. Unsightly. That's their official reason. Unsightly. It's so absurd, so petty, so infuriating. They weren't just attacking my gnomes, they were attacking my taste, my personality, my right to have a little bit of whimsy in my life. And that I wasn't going to stand for. If they wanted uniform, I'd give them uniform. But it wasn't going to be the kind of uniform they were expecting. Okay, so the gnome eviction notice? Yeah, that stung. I'm not gonna lie. I was genuinely bummed. Those little guys were like family. Seeing them carted off, one by one, into the back of some HOA lackey's truck, it was like watching my heart get ripped out, gnome by gnome. I felt violated, targeted, like my personal style was under attack. Okay, maybe I'm being a little dramatic, but still. For a while, I was just sad. My garden felt empty, sterile, like a piece of me was missing. I wandered around, kicking at stray leaves, feeling sorry for myself. The HOA had won. They'd crushed my gnome rebellion, or so they thought. Then, something snapped. I looked around at my now gnomeless garden, at the perfectly manicured lawns of my neighbors, at the beige houses, the beige mailboxes, the beige everything. And I just snapped. Uniform, huh? I muttered to myself, a slow grin spreading across my face. They want uniform? I'll give them uniform. The idea sparked in my mind, bright and pink and utterly ridiculous. If they wanted uniform, they'd get uniform. But it wasn't going to be their kind of uniform. It wasn't going to be beige and boring and soulless. It was going to be pink and plastic and utterly, gloriously tacky. Pink flamingos. The image popped into my head, and I knew instantly. It was perfect. A brightly colored, utterly ridiculous counterpoint to the HOA's beige world. A flock of pink plastic birds standing in defiant uniformity. A symbol of rebellion against the tyranny of aesthetic harmony. It was perfect. It was petty. It was exactly the kind of uniformity the HOA would absolutely hate. And that, my friends, was the whole point. The gnome genocide was over. The Flamingo uprising was about to begin. Okay, so, Operation Flamingo was a go. First things first, the birds themselves. I wasn't going to just grab any old flamingos. This had to be iconic, classic, tacky even. I wanted the quintessential pink flamingo, the kind you see in old movies, the kind that screams suburban kitsch. I hit up Amazon, naturally. And there they were, in all their plastic glory. Perfectly pink, perfectly tacky, perfectly perfect. I ordered a small flock, just a few to start. I wasn't going to go full flamingo crazy right away. This was a strategic deployment, a probe, a test to see how long it took the HOA to notice. When the flamingos arrived, I was giddy. They were even better in person. So pink, so plastic, so gloriously ridiculous. I carefully, strategically placed them in my front yard, not all clustered together, mind you. I wanted them to be distributed, like they were casually grazing, enjoying the now gnome-free landscape. 3 by the mailbox, 2 by the koi pond, 1 perched on the empty gnome village mushroom. It was subtle, but it was there, a pop of pink in a sea of beige. I waited. It didn't take long. Predictably, the HOA responded. Within 48 hours, I had another letter. This one was even more passive-aggressive than the gnome eviction notice. It was all about maintaining property values and preserving the aesthetic integrity of the neighborhood. Blah, blah, blah. Specifically, the letter stated, because they always have to be specific, The presence of unauthorized lawn ornaments, namely the pink flamingos, is in direct violation of Section 4, subsection D, paragraph 11 of the Willow Creek Estates CC and Rs. Unauthorized lawn ornaments? Seriously? They were calling my flamingos ornaments. They're birds. Plastic birds, yes, but birds nonetheless. And aesthetic integrity? Give me a break. The letter went on to threaten fines, of course, because that's their go-to move. Failure to remove these garish and inappropriate decorations within 72 hours will result in a fine of $200 per flamingo per day. $200 per flamingo per day? These guys were escalating, and so was I. The warning shot had been fired, and it just fueled my resolve. They wanted a war? Fine. They wanted pink? They were going to get pink. Lots and lots of pink. The initial flock was just the beginning. The flamingo uprising was about to get a whole lot pinker. Okay, so the HOA sent their little warning about the garish and inappropriate flamingos. $200 per flamingo per day? They were clearly underestimating my dedication to petty revenge. They wanted a flamingo war? They were going to get a flamingo war. The first warning? That meant the initial flock was just a scouting party. I hit up Amazon again, naturally. This time, I wasn't messing around. I ordered a lot more flamingos. Double the amount, to be precise. And then, when the next warning came, because predictably it did, I doubled that number. And then I doubled it again. It became a thing. A pink plastic multiplying thing. My front yard was slowly transforming into a sea of pink. It was glorious. It was ridiculous. It was exactly what the HOA deserved. The process was, well, it was an experience. I started buying the flamingos in bulk. Seriously, I had boxes of pink birds piling up in my garage. I became known at the local shipping store as the flamingo guy. They'd just see me walk in with another stack of boxes and shake their heads, chuckling. I got strategic with the placement. I wanted the flamingos to be everywhere. Lurking in the bushes, perched on the roof, even floating in the koi pond. I had to get some inflatable ones for that. It was like a pink flamingo invasion, and then I started adding variety. I got some smaller flamingos, some bigger ones, some doing yoga poses, yes, really, even some custom-made ones. I found a guy on Etsy who made tiny little flamingo sweaters. I kid you not, I bought a bunch. But the best part? The personalized insults. As the flamingo flock grew, I started adding little touches. Some flamingos got tiny HOA name tags with names like Mrs. McMillan and Mr. Peterson, the most vocal HOA board members. Others were posed in, let's just say, humorous ways. A few were mooning the HOA, tastefully, of course. One was even perched on a miniature toilet, reading a copy of the HOA bylaws. It was playful. It was petty. It was perfect. It was a playful but pointed insult directed at the HOA's obsession with control. It was a way of saying, you want uniform? Fine. Here's your uniform. But it wasn't just about revenge. It was about making a statement, about standing up to the Beige Brigade and their ridiculous rules, and about having a little bit of fun in the process. Because honestly, those pink flamingos made me smile every time I looked at them. And that, I think, is worth more than all the aesthetic harmony in the world. Okay, so the flamingo flock was growing. My front yard was basically a sea of pink, and the HOA was losing their collective minds. But the best part? The neighbors. Their reactions were priceless. Initially, there was shock, like genuine jaw-dropping shock. I'd catch people driving by, slowing down, craning their necks to get a better look at the flamingo phenomenon. Their faces were a mixture of confusion, disbelief, and a tiny bit of, was that amusement? Then came the gossip. Oh, the gossip. The flamingo flock became the topic of conversation in Willow Creek Estates. I'd overhear snippets of conversations as I was casually tending to my flamingo flock, aka adding more flamingos. Have you seen Jackson's yard? Those flamingos are insane. I heard the HOA is furious. It was like a soap opera, but with more pink and less drama. Well, mostly. Some neighbors were horrified, of course. The Karen types, the ones who were already on the HOA's side, were clutching their pearls and muttering about property values and what will the neighbors think. They probably wrote angry letters to the HOA, demanding that they do something about the flamingo infestation. But then there were the others, the ones who were secretly delighted by the whole thing, the ones who were tired of the HOA's rules and regulations, the ones who longed for a little bit of, well, fun in their lives. They'd give me a thumbs up when they drove by or leave anonymous notes on my door, praising my bold artistic statement. One neighbor even left me a 6-pack of beer and a bag of flamingo-shaped marshmallows. It was awesome. The flamingo flock became a symbol of rebellion against the HOA's tyranny, a symbol of just not taking things too seriously. It was a reminder that life is too short to worry about perfectly manicured lawns and aesthetic harmony. It was a reminder that sometimes a little bit of pink is exactly what you need to brighten your day. And the best part? Even the neighbors who were initially shocked started to come around. They realized that the flamingos weren't hurting anyone. They were just there, being pink, being ridiculous, being flamingos. And honestly, they were kind of growing on everyone. Even the grumpiest old guy on the street was seen chuckling as he walked by my yard. It was like the flamingos had a magical power, a way of disarming even the most hardened HOA sympathizers. It was brilliant. Okay, so the flamingo flock was thriving. The neighbors were amused, mostly. And the HOA? They were losing their collective minds. They were apoplectic, furious, incensed. Pick your adjective. They were feeling it. And Mrs. McMillan? Oh, she was on a whole other level of rage. I swear I could practically see steam coming out of her ears. They sent another letter, of course. This one wasn't just a warning. This was a demand. The flamingos had to go, immediately, or else. And the or else involved fines, legal action, and probably some kind of eternal damnation in a beige-themed hell. The presence of these garish avian monstrosities, the letter shrieked. Yes, it actually used the phrase avian monstrosities, is a clear and blatant violation of Section 4, subsection D, paragraph 11 of the Willow Creek Estates CC&Rs. They even highlighted the section in bright yellow, as if I hadn't already memorized it by heart. They threatened to fine me, of course, a hefty fine, like enough to buy a small flock of real flamingos. And they threatened to take legal action. They were going to sue me, over flamingos, plastic, pink flamingos. The absurdity of it all was almost too much to bear. But I wasn't worried, not one bit, because I had a secret weapon. A weapon forged from legal loopholes and pure, unadulterated sarcasm. My uniform defense. When they showed up for their official flamingo inspection, yes, they actually called it that, I was ready for them. I had my trusty dictionary by my side, a printed copy of the HOA bylaws, with Section 4, subsection D, paragraph 11 highlighted naturally, and a cooler full of flamingo-shaped snacks. I was prepared. Mrs. McMillan, looking like she was about to spontaneously combust, pointed a trembling finger at my flamingo flock. These things, she sputtered, must be removed. They are a blight on the neighborhood. They are not uniform. And that's when I unleashed my secret weapon. Uniform? I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. You say they're not uniform? Well, Mrs. McMillan, I beg to differ. I pulled out my dictionary and flipped to the definition of uniform. According to Webster's, I read aloud, uniform means being the same or alike, consistent, undeviating. I paused for dramatic effect. And, I continued, gesturing to my sea of pink, my lawn is, in fact, uniformly pink flamingos. They are all the same color, the same species, plastic, and the same avian monstrosity. Mrs. McMillan's face was turning an alarming shade of purple. But that's not what we meant by uniform, she spluttered. Ah, I replied, but your bylaws never actually defined what uniform meant, did they? They simply stated that lawns must be uniform. And, I added with a wink, my lawn is certainly that, uniformly pink and flamingo-filled. The other HOA board members were just staring at me, their mouths agape. They were clearly not prepared for this level of flamingo logic. Mrs. McMillan, however, was not giving up.
But it's unsightly, she shrieked.
Unsightly? I repeated. That's a matter of opinion, Mrs. McMillan. And as I recall, your bylaws also never defined what sightly or unsightly meant. Perhaps you should have been more specific.
I could see the gears turning in her head. She was trying to find some loophole, some way to wriggle out of this, but there was none. I had them. My uniform defense was airtight. Ridiculous, yes, but airtight. The flamingo flock was safe, at least for now. Okay, so my uniform defense had worked. For now. The HOA was defeated, at least on a technicality. But they weren't going down without a fight. They realized their mistake. They'd left a loophole big enough for a flock of flamingos to fly through, and they were determined to fix it. They called a special meeting. A meeting of the minds, as Mrs. McMillan so dramatically put it. The agenda? Changing the rules. Specifically, adding a new section to the CC and Rs. Pink flamingos, plastic or otherwise, are strictly prohibited. They were going to close the flamingo loophole once and for all. They sent out flyers, they put up signs, they even went door to door, trying to rally support for their anti-flamingo crusade. They painted me as the villain, the flamingo-loving anarchist who was single-handedly destroying the aesthetic harmony of Willow Creek Estates. They were pulling out all the stops. But here's the thing about the HOA. They underestimated the power of pink plastic. They underestimated the power of petty revenge. And, most importantly, they underestimated the power of the secret flamingo lovers. The day of the special meeting arrived, and the clubhouse was packed. Everyone in Willow Creek Estates was there. The Karen contingent, clutching their pearls and muttering about property values, were firmly on the HOA's side. But then there were the others, the ones who had secretly fallen in love with the flamingos, the ones who appreciated the humor, the rebellion, the splash of color in their otherwise bland neighborhood. They were the silent majority, the secret flamingo lovers, and they were about to make their voices heard. Mrs. McMillan, looking like she was about to lead a charge against a flock of feathered fiends, took the stage. She gave a passionate speech about the importance of aesthetic harmony, the dangers of unauthorized lawn ornaments, and the threat that pink flamingos posed to the very fabric of Willow Creek Estates. It was all very dramatic. Then it was time to vote, and that's when the magic happened. One by one, the residents cast their ballots. And one by one, the votes went against the rule change. The Karen contingent was stunned. They couldn't believe it. Their carefully crafted plan to ban the flamingos was crumbling before their very eyes. But the secret flamingo lovers had spoken. They'd seen the light, or rather, the pink. They'd realized that life is too short to worry about perfectly manicured lawns and aesthetic harmony. They'd embraced the flamingo, and so the HOA was defeated. Again, their attempt to change the rules had backfired spectacularly. They were stuck with the flamingos, forever. The flamingo flock was safe. They became a permanent fixture of Willow Creek Estates, a symbol of resistance against overbearing HOAs, and a testament to the power of pink plastic. They were a reminder that sometimes the best way to fight conformity is with a little bit of ridiculousness. And me? Well, I became a local legend, the Flamingo King, the pink plastic prophet, the guy who stood up to the HOA and won. And every time I look out at my sea of pink, I smile. It's a small victory, maybe, but it's a victory nonetheless. And honestly, it's a pretty pink victory. "So you want to annoy your HOA president?" she asked, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Let's just say I want to enhance the neighborhood's aesthetic," I replied with a wink. Esmeralda grinned. "I like your style." We settled on a price, and she agreed to deliver my new, feathered friend the following week. He was magnificent. He was ridiculous. He was perfect. And he was about to become Linda Davenport's worst nightmare, I thought, feeling a surge of triumphant glee. "He's a bit spirited," Esmeralda said, brushing herself off. "Just let him roam, he'll settle in." My backyard wasn't exactly a sprawling farm, but it was my sanctuary. Tucked away behind the standard-issue suburban house was a small, well-maintained chicken coop, painted a cheerful, and, I later learned, highly controversial, shade of red. Inside resided my flock. Henrietta, a plump Rhode Island red, Goldie, a shimmering buff Orpington, Beatrice, a sassy little silky, and Luna, a speckled Sussex with a penchant for escaping. They weren't just egg-laying machines. They were my feathered companions, each with their own quirky personality. It wasn't much, just a small coop, a little patch of grass, and 4 of the friendliest hens you'd ever meet. But it was my little slice of rural paradise, right here in the heart of suburbia. Fresh eggs every morning, the gentle clucking. It was perfect, I thought, watching them scratch and peck contentedly in the morning sun. The simple routine of collecting warm eggs, scattering scratch, and listening to their soft clucking was a calming ritual, a welcome contrast to the pressures of daily life. Of course, in a neighborhood ruled by the iron fist of the HOA, nothing good can last forever. I just didn't realize how quickly that forever would come to an end. The knock on the door was sharp, insistent, and utterly devoid of joy. I knew even before I opened it who it was. Linda Davenport. Picture a woman whose natural habitat is a beige-on-beige living room, whose favorite pastime is measuring her neighbor's grass with a ruler, and whose spirit animal is a tightly wound ball of yarn. She was the president of the Maplewood Estates HOA, and she ruled our little suburban kingdom with an iron fist and a seemingly endless supply of passive-aggressive notes. She stood on my porch, a vision of tightly controlled disapproval, her perfectly coiffed gray hair unyielding to the gentle breeze, her lips pursed in a perpetual expression of displeasure. "Mr. Henderson," she began, her voice as crisp and starched as her perfectly ironed blouse, "I'm afraid we have a situation." She paused, letting the word hang in the air like a threat. "It has come to the attention of the Homeowners Association that you are harboring poultry on your property." She said poultry, as if it were a synonym for biohazard. "They're chickens, Linda," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "They're pets, and they lay delicious eggs." "They're barnyard animals, Mr. Henderson," she retorted, her eyes narrowing. "They're noisy, they're messy, and they're simply not in keeping with the aesthetic of Maplewood Estates. They attract undesirables." I'm pretty sure the undesirables she was referring to were earthworms and the occasional ladybug. The HOA meeting was held, as always, in the community center's multi-purpose room, a space that reeked of stale coffee and simmering resentment. Linda Davenport, perched at the head table like a queen on her throne, presided over the proceedings with an air of grim determination. The agenda was, as usual, a laundry list of petty grievances and absurd regulations. There was a heated debate about the proper placement of trash cans on collection day. Apparently, placing them on the curb before 6 p.m. was a flagrant violation of community standards. There was a lengthy discussion about the unacceptable color of Mrs. Gable's new mailbox. It was too vibrant and distracting. And then, of course, came the main event, my chickens. Linda launched into a prepared speech, her voice dripping with righteous indignation. "These chickens," she declared, projecting photos of my harmless hens onto the screen, "are a menace to our community. They're noisy. They attract pests. They make us look like a farm." The horror in her voice was almost comical. "A farm? 4 chickens in a well-maintained coop make us look like a farm? I thought, my internal monologue growing increasingly sarcastic. She went on to cite obscure bylaws, misinterpret zoning regulations, and generally paint a picture of my backyard as a chaotic, disease-ridden wasteland. The other HOA members, a collection of mostly timid and easily intimidated individuals, nodded along with her every word. There was no debate, no discussion, no consideration of the fact that my chickens were well cared for, quiet, compared to Linda, at least, and a source of genuine joy. The motion to ban all backyard chickens, effective immediately, passed with a unanimous vote, except for mine, of course. Linda's power was absolute, her grip on the neighborhood unyielding. The next few days were a blur of sadness and frustration. I had to find a new home for Henrietta, Goldie, Beatrice, and Luna. I contacted local farms, animal shelters, and even a few sympathetic friends, desperately searching for a place where my beloved hens would be safe and well cared for. Finally, I found a small, family-run farm a few towns over, where the owners promised to give them a good life. The day I drove them to their new home was one of the hardest I'd had in a long time. Saying goodbye to the girls was harder than I thought. They weren't just chickens. They were part of the family. And now, thanks to Linda and her beige brigade, they were gone, I thought, watching them disappear down the long, dusty driveway. I returned to a quiet, empty backyard. The coop, once filled with the gentle clucking and scratching of my hens, was now silent and desolate. It was a constant, painful reminder of Linda's victory, of the HOA's power, and of my own helplessness. But as I stood there, staring at the empty coop, a new feeling began to emerge. A spark of defiance. A flicker of rebellion. I couldn't bring back my chickens. Not yet, anyway. But I could do something. I could find a way to fight back. To exploit the HOA's own ridiculous rules. To turn their obsession with aesthetics against them. Linda Davenport, you want a war on poultry? You've got one. Prepare for the Peacock, I vowed internally. A plan, as audacious as it was feathered, beginning to hatch in my mind. My first step was research. I needed ammunition, a weapon, a legal loophole that would allow me to unleash my feathered fury upon Linda Davenport and the HOA. I spent hours poring over the HOA bylaws, a document so dense and convoluted that it could induce a coma in even the most enthusiastic lawyer. I scanned through sections on landscaping, exterior decorations, and nuisance animals, searching for any clause, any phrase, any vaguely worded sentence that I could exploit. And then I found it. Tucked away in a subsection titled Prohibited Animals was a list of specifically banned creatures. Dogs exceeding 40 pounds, cats exceeding 3 in number, pigs, goats, sheep, and other livestock, and, of course, chickens, roosters, and other poultry. But there was no mention of exotic birds, no mention of ornamental pets, no mention of peacocks. It was like finding a secret passage in a video game, a hidden loophole just waiting to be exploited. And I was about to exploit it in the most spectacular way possible, I thought, a triumphant grin spreading across my face. The bylaws were specific, and specific was good. It meant there was wiggle room. It meant there was hope. It meant I could unleash a feathered fiend upon Sunridge Estates, and there wasn't a damn thing Linda Davenport could do about it. With the loophole identified, it was time to move on to Phase 2. Operation Peacock. I dove headfirst into the world of peafowl, a world I hadn't even known existed a few days earlier. I learned about their different breeds, their dietary needs, their mating rituals, and most importantly, their vocalizations. My browser history went from Best Chicken Breeds for Beginners to How Loud is a Peacock and Legal to Own Peacock in State. In record time, I chuckled, scrolling through pages of information. I discovered that peacocks were indeed very loud. Their calls, described as piercing, ear-splitting, and reminiscent of a woman screaming, could be heard for miles. Perfect. I found a local breeder who specialized in exotic birds, a woman named Esmeralda who had a voice like a foghorn and a collection of feathered creatures that would make a zoo jealous. She was initially skeptical of my request. A peacock in suburbia? But she warmed up to the idea when I explained my situation. "So, you want to annoy your HOA president?" she asked, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Let's just say I want to enhance the neighborhood's aesthetic," I replied with a wink. Esmeralda grinned. "I like your style." We settled on a price, and she agreed to deliver my new, feathered friend the following week. The day Sir Reginald the Magnificent arrived was a day I'll never forget. Esmeralda pulled up in a large, custom-built trailer emblazoned with the words, "Feathered Friends Exotic Bird Transport." The neighbors, drawn by the unusual vehicle, gathered on their lawns, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Esmeralda, a woman who clearly enjoyed a bit of drama, opened the trailer door with a flourish. And there he was, Sir Reginald the Magnificent. He was breathtaking. A fully grown Indian blue peacock with a shimmering iridescent blue neck and chest and a tail fan that stretched for what seemed like miles, a cascade of emerald green and sapphire blue eyes. He was larger than I'd expected, more vibrant, more regal. He looked like he belonged in a palace, not a suburban backyard. He was magnificent. He was ridiculous. He was perfect. And he was about to become Linda Davenport's worst nightmare, I thought, feeling a surge of triumphant glee. The delivery process was interesting. Sir Reginald, it turned out, was not a fan of being confined. He emerged from the trailer with a series of squawks and a flurry of feathers, nearly taking out Esmeralda in the process. "He's a bit spirited," Esmeralda said, brushing herself off. "Just let him roam. He'll settle in." The delivery driver looked from me to the bird to the surrounding houses and back to me, pure bewilderment. You sure about this, man?" "Never been more sure of anything in my life." He shrugged, climbed back into the cab, and drove off, leaving me to contemplate the majestic chaos I had unleashed. Sir Reginald, true to Esmeralda's word, immediately began to explore his new domain. He strutted across my lawn, his tail feathers fanned out in all their glory, his head held high, as if surveying his kingdom. He pecked at the grass, investigated the flower beds, and generally behaved as if he owned the place, which, in a way, he now did. He refused to be confined to the old chicken coop. He had no interest in fences, boundaries, or any other form of human-imposed restriction. He was a free spirit, a feathered monarch, and he was going to roam wherever he pleased. The neighbors, initially apprehensive, were quickly captivated. Children pointed and giggled, adults stared in open-mouthed wonder, and even the dogs seemed to be intimidated by his regal presence. He was a walking, squawking, iridescent spectacle, a splash of exotic beauty in the otherwise mundane landscape of Sunridge Estates. And then, of course, came the encounter with Linda Davenport. It happened on Sir Reginald's first morning in the neighborhood. He'd decided, for reasons known only to himself, that Linda's front porch was the perfect spot for his sunrise serenade. He perched majestically on the railing, directly in front of her living room window, and, at the precise moment the sun crested the horizon, he let out a piercing, ear-splitting screech. It was a sound that could wake the dead, a primal scream that echoed through the quiet, unsuspecting streets of Sunridge Estates. I watched from my kitchen window, sipping my coffee, a smile playing on my lips. The war had begun, and Sir Reginald the Magnificent was leading the charge. The sound of Linda Davenport's scream, even from across the street, was enough to make me spill my coffee. I peered out the window, and there it was, the confrontation I'd been eagerly anticipating. Linda, in her perfectly pressed pastel bathrobe and slippers, was standing on her porch, pointing a trembling finger at Sir Reginald the Magnificent, who was perched regally on her meticulously maintained rose bush, casually pecking at a prize-winning bloom. That thing is a menace, she shrieked, her voice reaching a pitch that could shatter glass. It's loud, it's disruptive, and it's peacocking all over the neighborhood. She seemed particularly offended by the verb peacocking. As if Sir Reginald's very existence was a personal affront to her, I strolled out onto my porch, a mug of coffee in hand, a picture of serene innocence. "Good morning, Linda," I said, my voice dripping with faux concern. "Is there a problem?" "A problem?" she repeated, her eyes bulging. "A problem, Mr. Henderson, that creature is destroying my garden. It's screeching like a banshee. It's unacceptable." "He's expressing himself, Linda," I corrected her gently. "It's called freedom of expression. Perhaps you've heard of it. He's also providing valuable pest control. Peacocks are known for their appetite for insects, you know." "I'll have it removed," she declared, her face now a shade of purple that clashed violently with her pink bathrobe. "I'll call animal control. I'll call the police. Go ahead," I said, taking a leisurely sip of my coffee. "I've already checked. He's perfectly legal. He's classified as an ornamental pet, and there are no HOA bylaws prohibiting exotic birds. You banned chickens, Linda, not peacocks." Watching Linda's face turn that familiar shade of purple was worth every penny I'd spent on Sir Reginald. It was a masterpiece of suburban schadenfreude, I thought, struggling to suppress a grin. She sputtered, she fumed, she threatened, but it was all for naught. Sir Reginald, meanwhile, continued to dismantle her rose bush, one prize-winning bloom at a time, seemingly oblivious to the chaos he was causing. The emergency HOA meeting, called by a clearly desperate Linda Davenport, was a spectacle of panicked disarray. The usually orderly community center was filled with a buzz of anxious whispers and nervous glances. Linda, looking like she hadn't slept in days, stood at the podium, her face pale and drawn, her usually impeccable hair slightly askew. This peacock," she began, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and exhaustion, "is a threat to our community. It's loud, it's destructive, and it's unpredictable." She projected a series of blurry photos onto the screen. Sir Reginald perched on her roof, Sir Reginald strutting through her garden, Sir Reginald staring menacingly into her kitchen window. She proposed an immediate and total ban on all non-domesticated avian species within Sunridge Estates, a motion clearly targeted at Sir Reginald. But this time, her usual iron grip on the HOA seemed to be slipping. There were murmurs of dissent, hesitant questions, and even a few outright expressions of amusement. "He's kind of beautiful, though, isn't he?" Mrs. Gable said tentatively. "My grandkids love him," Mr. Henderson added. "They call him Reggie." Even some of Linda's most loyal supporters seemed to be wavering. The peacock, it turned out, was more popular than she'd anticipated. The meeting, instead of being a swift condemnation of Sir Reginald, devolved into a chaotic debate, with Linda's increasingly shrill pronouncements being met with a growing wave of resistance. Sir Reginald the Magnificent, meanwhile, was becoming a local celebrity. The local newspaper, the Sunridge Estates Gazette, ran a front-page story about him, titled "The Fabulous Peacock of Maplewood Estates." The article described him as a flamboyant and feathered resident who has captured the hearts of the community, and included several photos of him strutting through the neighborhood, his tail feathers shimmering in the sun. Then came the TikTok trend. Someone posted a video of Sir Reginald chasing a mail truck set to a catchy pop song, and it went viral. Millions of views, thousands of comments, and a sudden influx of peacock-related hashtags. Reginald the Peacock, Peacock Life, #suburban safari. Local businesses started capitalizing on his fame. A bakery created a Reginald-themed cupcake, decorated with blue and green frosting and edible glitter. A clothing store started selling Reginald Fan Club t-shirts, featuring a cartoon image of the peacock wearing a crown. Even the mayor, sensing a PR opportunity, posted a photo of himself with Sir Reginald on his official social media account, praising the peacock for bringing a touch of exotic beauty and much-needed levity to our town. Linda, of course, was furious. She'd become a laughingstock, her attempts to maintain order and conformity thwarted by a single, spectacularly flamboyant bird. The contrast between the online praise for Sir Reginald and Linda's increasingly desperate outrage was both hilarious and deeply satisfying. Linda's attempts to have Sir Reginald removed through official channels were met with a series of increasingly frustrating roadblocks. She called animal control multiple times, but each time they arrived, they found Sir Reginald to be well cared for, perfectly legal, and, frankly, quite charming. The animal control officers, after posing for a few pictures with him, would leave, leaving Linda fuming on her porch. Then came the Wildlife Preservation Society. A local chapter, alerted to Sir Reginald's presence by the viral social media posts, contacted me, offering their support. They declared Sir Reginald a bird of interest. Apparently, peacocks weren't technically endangered, but they were still considered worthy of protection, and they warned the HOA that any attempt to harm or relocate him would be met with swift legal action. Linda was trapped. She couldn't ban him through the HOA, she couldn't have him removed by animal control, and she couldn't even complain about him without risking the wrath of the Wildlife Preservation Society. Sir Reginald the Magnificent, my feathered weapon of choice, had proven to be legally untouchable, a walking, squawking, peacocking embodiment of HOA defiance, and there wasn't a damn thing she could do about it. Linda's next desperate move was to call animal control. She reported a dangerous, aggressive, and excessively loud bird terrorizing the neighborhood, hoping to have Sir Reginald removed on grounds of public nuisance or some other trumped-up charge. The animal control officer, a weary-looking man named Bob, arrived at my door, clipboard in hand, expecting to find a rampaging beast. Instead, he found Sir Reginald the Magnificent calmly pecking at the grass in my front yard, looking about as threatening as a fluffy blue and green lawn ornament. "That's him?" Bob asked, pointing at Sir Reginald with a slightly bewildered expression. "That's him," I confirmed. Bob spent the next half hour observing Sir Reginald, checking his condition, and asking me a series of questions about his care. He concluded that the peacock was perfectly healthy, well-fed, and, despite his impressive size and occasional ear-splitting screeches, not a threat to anyone. "Peacocks are legal to own in this state, ma'am," Bob informed Linda, who had been hovering nearby, her face a mask of frustrated rage. "And this one seems to be well cared for. There's nothing I can do." He tipped his hat to me, gave Sir Reginald a final, admiring glance, and drove away, leaving Linda sputtering in his wake. The final, crushing blow to Linda's anti-peacock campaign came from an unexpected source, the Sunridge Estates Wildlife Preservation Society, SUPES, a small but dedicated group of local nature enthusiasts. They'd been following the Sir Reginald saga with great interest, and they decided to intervene. They sent a letter to the HOA declaring Sir Reginald a bird of interest and a valuable addition to the local ecosystem. They argued that peacocks, while not native to the area, were beneficial for pest control and provided a unique opportunity for residents to observe and appreciate exotic wildlife. They even hinted at the possibility of declaring Sir Reginald a protected species. A slight exaggeration, but effective nonetheless, which would make any attempt to remove him a legal nightmare. Linda, faced with the prospect of battling not only me and the increasingly pro-peacock neighborhood, but also a group of determined wildlife advocates, finally realized she was defeated. The Soaps, with their earnest enthusiasm and their arsenal of nature-related facts, had become my unlikely allies, providing the final layer of protection for my feathered friend. The end came swiftly and decisively. Linda Davenport, the once mighty queen of the Maplewood Estates HOA, resigned in disgrace. Her resignation letter was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive self-pity, blaming everyone but herself for her downfall. She claimed she was the victim of a coordinated campaign of harassment, a witch hunt orchestrated by unruly elements within the community. Nobody bought it. Within a month, a for sale sign appeared in front of her perfectly manicured and now peacock-free lawn. She sold her house at a slight loss. The market, it seemed, was not as enthusiastic about beige-on-beige conformity as she was, and moved away, presumably to inflict her brand of joyless tyranny on some other unsuspecting neighborhood. The news of her departure was met with a collective sigh of relief, followed by a spontaneous neighborhood block party held naturally in my backyard with Sir Reginald the Magnificent as the guest of honor. With Linda gone, the HOA underwent a dramatic transformation. The old guard was replaced by a new, more progressive and pro-peacock leadership. The bylaws were revised, the emphasis shifting from strict conformity to fostering a sense of community and celebrating individual expression. Sir Reginald the Magnificent, once a source of controversy, became the official mascot of Maplewood Estates. His image appeared on the neighborhood website, on community newsletters, and even on a new, redesigned welcome sign. The neighborhood had embraced its feathered overlord, and the HOA, once a symbol of oppression, was now a champion of peacock-related pride. The change extended to the renaming of streets. One was even, no joke, named Reginald's Run. The HOA even voted to use dues to commission a local artist to create a bronze statue of Sir Reginald. Life in Maplewood Estates settled into a new, more colorful normal. Every morning, I'd sit on my porch, sipping my coffee, watching Sir Reginald the Magnificent strut through the neighborhood, his tail feathers shimmering in the sunlight. He'd often perch on the roof of Linda's former house, a particularly satisfying sight, as if claiming his territory, asserting his dominance over the once forbidden kingdom. The neighbors, once wary of his presence, now greeted him with smiles and offerings of treats. Peacocks, it turned out, have a particular fondness for grapes. He'd become a part of the community, a beloved, if slightly eccentric, resident. Who knew that a few chickens and a burning desire for revenge could lead to all this? I guess sometimes you just gotta get a peacock to find your peace, I thought, watching him let out a triumphant screech that echoed through the streets. I raised my coffee mug in a silent toast. To Sir Reginald the Magnificent, may his reign be long, loud, and utterly infuriating to all future Karens.